I think the most important lesson was don't stick with like a rigid investment thesis.
Adapt.
Yeah, adapt and learn from other people. And I think what I've learned over the years in Vancouver and Toronto and kind of future cities is that there is always strong demand. Like people make bets on Vancouver for two reasons. You have incredible demand and you have these significant supply constraints.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
It's going to like blow out the... I may have to edit in a proper one. We'll see how it goes.
That's pretty awesome.
That's not bad, right? It's redlining harsh on the recording, so we'll see if it works or not.
Are we ready to rock after this? Good to go?
Cut it out. There we go. I think it's working.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, for a very fun in-person episode of the Tom Storey Show, your Sunday weekly real estate roundup podcast. I can't guarantee when this episode is going to come out because we're going to basically record a lot when we are here in Vancouver. Steven, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic, man. It's
Yeah.
nice. Your Air Canada, you should have gone WestJet.
Well, I was only like an hour and a half late, which isn't too bad. But literally, I landed here. And I thought like, okay, I'd just hang out for a bit. And right away, I just find out that we're just like recording all day long.
We're going straight.
Steve just
back
like,
to
you're
back
in
to back.
Vancouver, but come to my dark basement, my bat cave, and let's just talk on microphones.
I mean, we're recording the next one next week, right? You're here for like, don't go too far.
I'm here for a month.
Yeah.
Except, no, I'm not if you're a client listening. I'm definitely not here for a month. Welcome back to the show. I appreciate everyone being here. If you're listening on the audio platforms or watching on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, all we ask is you give this episode a big fat like and subscribe. If you have not, we're on the track to get to 3,000 subscribers, and the goal, publicly putting it out there, is to get there by the fall, kind of on the track that we've been on so far. So we appreciate you being here. If you're listening on the audio platforms and have not already, make sure to give us a review. On to this week's guest, who's physically here. I could touch him. I won't. I'll let you be over there. Adam Scalena has joined us, the OG, I would say, of real estate podcasting. So you guys have had the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast for 8 years. You're with Oakland Real Estate Downtown. Welcome, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I guess I'm the first of today, of the many recordings today.
You're the first this week. Then we got next week.
Okay.
I can tell he's better at this than us because his audio is like already so much better. So we're good.
I'm leaning in.
Yeah, there you go.
Sounds real good.
We're actually way closer here than I thought we were going to be when I set
close
this up.
quarters.
Yeah.
So
No footsies.
No, well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, our producer actually is called the Podfather, so I'll take OG over, I guess, because Podfather's already taken. So,
do you have like a full production studio?
Yeah, you know what? Over the years, we've kind of optimized it just so we haven't. Every year, we're trying to make it easier.
Right.
It's like the weekly noose around your neck that you always got to put out an episode, right? So anything that we can actually streamline and outsource, we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
And so do you guys have a certain time every single week that you record always? How does it work on your end?
We usually do like Tuesday or Wednesday mornings.
Yep.
If we can get people in studio.
You release that week?
No, we try to, like,
quickly?
right now we're probably about 4 episodes ahead, but
Oh, wow.
we kind of, it depends. Sometimes we can front load, other times we're like scrambling to get
We
something
do the same
out.
thing. Yeah.
And usually we record early in the week and then we release every Thursday.
So 8 years ago, why did you start a podcast? Because I feel like it was like, now it's like everybody and their best friend has a podcast.
Right.
8 years ago, what was the mindset? Like, first of all,
Actually, us.
it's literally us. I'm just describing us. But so first of all, let's go back before you answer that. Years in real estate, like, how did you get to that point that now, I'm sure you're well known from other things, but like on the online community, you're known for being a podcast host, right?
Yeah, it's strange. So, I mean, I started selling real estate in end of 2010, beginning of 2011. So my brother joined me in 2013, and we were kind of growing our team at that time. And we actually, we would have some guys from the office that we'd head out and usually have like a pint of beer after a long day of work. And we'd talk about the market and we'd talk about upcoming neighborhoods and we'd talk about how the city's changing and where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
And we'd have these conversations like we were just real estate obsessed. right? And
Yeah.
I mean, we're still real estate obsessed, but we
And now you monetized it.
well, part of it was we were actually looking for other podcasts, and we couldn't find anything. There was like bigger pockets at the time, obviously very US focused, which doesn't do much when you're a Canadian real estate investor. And so we started the show, and then we put it out there, and the downloads were surprisingly high. And so we were kind of like, oh man, this is maybe like first to market. Like we better hustle and actually kind of grow this thing. So we just kept going with it. But it's been fantastic.
So 8 years later, is it now getting to the point that you get so many downloads that you're like walking down the street downtown Vancouver and someone's like, "Hey, I listened to the podcast." Like,
no, he stayed off of YouTube. He's smarter than that.
Nobody recognizes me.
Oh, true.
It's funny though. Like we're now. We're still growing, I would say, but we're like a regional show, right?
Yep.
So, if we were a Canadian real estate show, our numbers would probably be larger, but we've kind of kept it focused regionally just because we're about 40,000 downloads a month. So it's very targeted, right? So for us, like the value is like the riches are in the niches kind of thing, right? So and that's what that's kind of what we've been, working with, is just kind of staying hyper local. If you listen to our show, we're not going to be talking about Sudbury or something like that typically. We do touch on some of the larger markets, and we touch on the province, but it's pretty tailored for BC.
So when are we getting you guys more consistent on YouTube then, so we can see your face? And people
I thought I saw you guys on YouTube.
No, they are on YouTube, but you're not as consistent as you are on the audio
Our
side.
tagline before, and we still have it at the end of our outro, but is "Faces for Radio." So we've kind of always
That's us too, but we just still record ourselves.
I find what the other thing is like we're not super tech savvy. So this year we're doing more with Instagram and social, but YouTube's still a bit of a black box for us. So.
Well, I'd say between YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter, YouTube's the best place to be.
Is it?
Well,
100%.
in terms of comments.
Oh, I had to get rid of Twitter. I couldn't.
Same. Honestly,
congratulations.
your life will be way better.
Yeah. It's funny. The guys I know that do the most business in our market, at least, they don't monitor the market every 30 seconds. Like they just push through and they sell real estate and they do exceptionally well. Right?
100% correct.
It's like Twitter will ruin your day, your week, your month, whatever.
Well, and it's a pretty easy formula to get followership. You just be very, very negative about things. You try to scare people, and people will follow you.
Yeah, exactly.
If that's how you. Well, I mean, same thing as YouTube, I guess. And we've seen that. Trying to go the other direction, but
we try to go the other. Oh, we don't with our titles and thumbnails.
Well, we got to get you to click on it.
Is this episode going to be called "Why the Market's Going to Crash in 6 months"?
It is now. It is now. It's exactly what it's going to be
said.
Called.
Why the Vancouver market's crashing?
No, you got to take something from. I mean, it's an hour-long conversation, so you got to take something from it and stick it in. And then if you are dealing with the comments, they're only focused on price. And that's it. And they're all geniuses on exactly what they know when the right time to get in, which is never, right? It's always going to crash. And I don't know. It's just, we're trying to kind of grow an audience that has a little bit more nuance to it.
Sure.
Ideally, right? Like I'm obviously I'm on track of home ownership. Home ownership is one of the probably other than getting married and becoming a dad, the coolest thing I ever did.
Sure.
Right. And everybody's thinking about this from investment. Investors are terrible people. And it's so much more simple than that. Like the pride you have in owning your own real estate is something that you can't describe to the trolls in the comments. Because I don't know if they don't experience it. Maybe they hate their own houses if they have them. But it's just home ownership is the thing. And then when you get there, I think it was Nolan, was like, when you buy that first investment, I think Jazz DeCar says it. He's like, it's like the best drug ever, man. Because it's just there's something about just investing and doing better, trying to grow yourself, trying to grow your net worth. That's just so awesome. Right?
Yeah.
And I just don't know if the trolls are never going to get it.
It is what it is. It's a small minority of people commenting, and it's always the same probably for you guys, whether it's reviews or people emailing you or whatever. It's the people that love listening to you every single week don't tell you.
Sure.
They move on with their life. It's the people that have something negative to say. Whenever people ask me to say in Toronto, hey, do you like this developer? Where's a place I can go to learn about them? Here's a place you can go, but it's only going to be negative because people don't leave positive reviews unless they're specifically asked to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we talked about home ownership, which is great, but then the next level is investment. I know you guys are really passionate about the investment side.
You have to be. It's downtown Vancouver,
Well,
right?
you know what? It's interesting, but I mean, this is probably the same in Toronto, I would imagine. But just because of our real estate prices here, we always kind of, we sit down with people that are buying their first home, whatever. You still have to have that investment side in the background, right? Because so we still use strategies that are very investor kind of focused, because the reality is a lot of people have to climb through the market here. So you have to make a good investment to make sure that you have equity to move into the next. So it's the property ladder, right? So from that perspective, we are, and we invest in real estate ourselves, residential and commercial. So, and we have for a number of years. So
what does that portfolio look like?
Right now I've got seven doors residential, and then joint. I did like a JV for I think we're at about 14 or 15 commercial doors.
And that's all in Vancouver or BC?
In BC. So the market's spread out between Vancouver, Kelowna, and the Okanagan, and then on the island, Victoria and Nanaimo.
Interesting. And that's been going well for you, I'm guessing?
Yeah. I mean, it's been incredible. I mean, I grew up in Winnipeg, so I feel like
I flew over Winnipeg today.
Yeah, not much to see. It's funny. I mean, it's a great place to grow up, but the thing about, I always feel like my superpower of being in the Lower Mainland is everything's beautiful to me and everything's amazing to me. And I see the opportunity in markets where people that grew up here think, oh, that's like where, that's a shithole, or that's that's like where I got my hat stolen when I was a kid, and that's a bad part of town or whatever, right? I mean, it's all amazing to me. So
that's actually a really good point. You perceive something a certain way because that's what you were told as a kid.
Stigmas, right?
Yeah.
Like stigmas. Like I'm sure in Toronto, there's certain areas where 100%. You're like, oh man, like even like parts of Surrey or parts of East Van where I live, like East Vancouver, like a lot of people are like, oh man, like from the west side. It's like,
is that what you're thinking when you're driving over to Steve's house? You're like, oh, this piece of shit.
I cannot
believe it. As soon as you go over the Alex Fraser Bridge, you're just like, oh no.
No, but I mean, I live in East Van, and it's like the same thing. A lot of people always say, oh, you're in East Van, like, like we used to have this kid on our team who grew up in Yaletown, and he was like, I better like, pack my bulletproof vest to visit you in East Vancouver. And I was like, okay, give me a break. But yeah.
So moving forward, we all sell in markets that are relatively expensive, right? And it's one thing to buy the property that you're going to live in. And I've got 4 doors myself. I've invested. Steve's got an investment property as well. You start breaking down the numbers, and it's not like it was a decade ago where you can buy something at 20% down and cash flow. Like those days are gone.
Yeah.
And specifically in my market, I'm sure it's
a decade ago.
Yeah.
You couldn't cash flow a decade
in Toronto
ago.
You could.
Yeah.
In Toronto you could.
Oh, Toronto, yeah. Actually,
Toronto you could a decade ago. Maybe 8 years ago.
I was even thinking maybe closer than that. But
yeah.
But Toronto's always been kind of a better cash flow market than Vancouver. From my perspective, like looking at just what like downtown rents are versus price per door, although that's changed a lot.
Well,
right?
It's changed now. It's like now you're at 35-40% to break even, maybe.
Right.
So why are people so obsessed with investing in Vancouver, in Toronto? If you don't cash flow, you got to put a lot of money down. If you put 20% down, you're negative. Of course, the answer is capital appreciation over time, but that could take a long time. And what we've seen the last few years is you can get caught on the wrong side of it and lose a bunch of money as well.
Right. I actually, one of the first books I read, which I'm sure all your listeners have read and everybody reads, was like The Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Sure. Pay yourself first.
Pay yourself first, but also that anything that didn't cash flow was a liability, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of always had that mindset. And I think one of the things,
Wealthy Barber was pay yourself first.
Never mind. Yeah. But still, like the same idea applies, right? And it's this idea that as you're going through your real estate journey or whatever you want to call it, your investment thesis will change over time, right? And I remember, I think the most important lesson was don't stick with like a rigid investment thesis.
Adapt
and learn from other people. And I think what I've learned over the years in Vancouver and Toronto and kind of future cities is that there is always strong demand. Like people make bets on Vancouver for 2 reasons. You have incredible demand and you have these significant supply constraints, right? And that's kind of perpetual here. Like it's almost an impossible cycle to break. And so the demand, it's like we are like the definition of like a 15-minute city, right? We're super health conscious.
Super controversial topic online, it seems like.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be the other title. But like you know what I mean? We're super walkable. We're super beautiful, super health conscious. We've got the robust economy with tech. We're part of Cascadia. So we've got, a ton of future industries in our market, high paying jobs. We've got a lot of migration. Last year alone, we were 150,000 new people entered BC. Thinking about with immigration now at 1 million people a year or whatever is gonna be the new norm. A lot of them are going to settle in the Lower Mainland, and on top of that, it's like we're safe. We've got great education. And we operate as part of the Pacific Rim as well. So it's a really well-positioned city in Canada and North America. And then on top of that, we have had the worst supply constraints. Like if you think, first of all, geographically, we got the mountains to the north, we've got the ocean to the west, we've got the U.S. border to the south. And and the agricultural land reserve to the east, right? So we're very locked in this region. So we can only go up. And then on top of that, we've got really, really negligent zoning. I would think.
We'll go into that.
Next. What do you mean by negligent? Well, I want to go into that now.
I think. Well, it's like I think a lot of politicians over the years have really just turned a blind eye to zoning, and then we have NIMBY, a NIMBY culture that exists that is incredible. It's notorious, right? We have like a friend of mine years ago said, Vancouver itself is like Manhattan in the 1800s. Like when you think about how underdeveloped it is, like around the city center, like it's ridiculous that we have so much single family zoning around, so close to the city, right? Even on arterials, right? And now we're starting to see upzoning, and then the permit process, which is just, and I understand Toronto's bad. I think we're probably one of the worst in Canada.
Vancouver might actually even be worse than the surrounding, like Burnaby, Surrey, everywhere else, because there is just so much single family. Like there's the downtown core.
Yeah.
And then everything else is, sure there's some low-rise apartments built in the 60s, Fairview or Fraserview, Fairview, whatever the hell it is down
Fairview,
there.
yeah.
But there is just too much single family.
It's incredible, right? For how many people, how much demand we have here and how little supply we have in the region. So, I think that's the bet that people are making in this market. And, we see this market jump, 20% in a year. That's, the idea in Vancouver is if you buy something and it doesn't go up 10, 20% in a year, it's broken.
Right.
It's like my realtor sucks,
So given you have obviously a change in mindset about how you invest, when you started investing, how does your, as you call it, your investment thesis, what was it then? And versus what is it now, or how has it evolved?
So I think the big thing, I used to look for opportunities in smaller markets.
Hang on.
Thanks for pouring your coffee.
For all those listening, I'm not peeing right now. I'm just pouring a coffee.
I'll just put a bow on that, on the supply and demand before I get into this. But the idea here is one thing I will say is that every property I own now did not start as a cash flow property, but they all get there. And the reason they get there is like we've seen almost a 25-30% increase in rents in the last like 18 months, right? So and when you think about it from the perspective of like residential's a bit trickier, right? And commercial, obviously, you're repositioning assets. That's what you're doing. You're driving up rents. In a lot of cases, it's often harder to do in residential. But over the years, just through either optimizing through like forced appreciation or improvements to the property, or through just getting new tenants and letting the market do its thing. Now, almost every property, I think every property we own right now is cash flow positive. Not a huge, like it's not like it's not huge cash flow, but the liability factor is gone.
Yeah, to get that many properties, were you refining and jumping up along the way, moving equity around, or partnering with people to do it?
Yeah, and it's a good question. So for the residential properties, most of them, some are owned personally, some are owned now in my holdco.
Sure.
And some of them, what I've done actually over the years, and which some people will think is risky, but whenever I have equity like HELOCs, what I was doing was it's debt equity. So, and I didn't love the idea of purchasing properties with it, but what I was doing is flips with it. So rehabbing properties with the money from the equity.
Still doing that?
So I have a property right now that's being renovated, and I'm just trying to beat the
numbers
the
are looking
policy
okay.
coming up. Numbers are looking okay. Yeah, right now, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think it's a problem? Like, this is going to be an easy answer for 3 realtors, but rehabbing properties is demonized now, right?
Absolutely,
like, it's like, oh, how dare you improve that property, make it a nicer place to live and get a higher rent? And it's like, why, if it wasn't for people renoing and flipping, a lot of the houses would just be in shambles.
So, like, I agree with you 100%. I'm sure everybody at this table agrees, but it's like demonizing developers who are creating houses. Like, let's be honest, like David Eby couldn't build an IKEA desk, and like you need developers to build housing. Like, we should be leveraging the development community. Developers, like, honestly, like we thought about putting out a shirt saying hug a developer, but just because I think it's the opposite. People get it so wrong, right? But it's this idea that like we're rehabbing missing middle product that is so bad. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a crime scene, mm-hmm. right? Like it's and we're not buying it if it's not a crime scene, because then we're competing with end users, and you don't want to compete with an end user. So like literally we're going to the properties that, like, this one had, I mean, if I toured anybody through this property, they'd be like, nah, I'm not doing it. And and let's be honest, how many end users right now are taking on huge renovations?
No, they're
like,
not.
None.
Well, it's crazy, right?
None.
Like, we've seen like a 30-40% increase in costs around, like, look at for building right now. I was thinking about that on the drive over. Like, replacement cost is so out of whack. Like, I think the best deals right now are like buy a house from like built between 2011 and 2018, because anything that's been built COVID on,
right?
Like, at least those people have seen a lift, and they'll probably part with their house, right?
Anyone recently isn't going to give it away.
Well, let's think about, like, I built a house in East Vancouver in 2017. The market value of my house right now is about $500,000 less than the replacement cost to buy the lot and build. $500,000 less, but I'm still up because of when I bought and built. Mm-hmm. So it's this is a strange moment from inflation, prices, and construction, and there's a gap there, right? And that makes me think, like, I had a client of mine who just got quoted by an higher end build company that does like West Coast modern stuff, $1,000 a square foot to build. $1,000 a foot. And I said to her, why don't we just go buy something from 2017 or like new enough?
Yeah.
You know,
and just do some interior renos, and
you'll save, literally in her case, I think she'd save $1.52 million.
Crazy.
By not building. That's a $5 million house she's building. Yeah. It's a 5,000 square foot house. That's a $5 million improvement.
With your shirt idea, we have to add I heart speculators.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't have a speculator, who's going to buy the pre-con? None of it's going to get built. Tomorrow's housing supply depends on speculation today. It depends on it.
100%.
And if we don't do that, like you say, we recently got a chance to interview the housing minister, and his thing is, hey, government's getting in the game again.
Does the Homes for People plan?
How well that's going to work?
Oh God.
So we had Ravi on the show. He was a great guest and
super bright guy.
Yeah, really good conversation.
Super bright guy. So I went to see him speak. Stephen Jagger, who does
I saw that. It was on YouTube.
Yeah. So Stephen Jagger did a conference, a small gathering kind of thing with Ravi, and my takeaway was super nice guy, super bright. He basically said that David Eby has kind of given him full reign to do whatever he wants to do. And he told this story to a room of people, a lot of them development, real estate industry, about how 2 or 3 years ago, when he wasn't in politics or in his role, he was riding the SkyTrain to see the Whitecaps game with a friend of his. And his friend said, let's stop at the Nanaimo SkyTrain station, Nanaimo, and they get out in East Vancouver. And his friend says, look around. Okay, his friend's apparently visiting from the UK. He says, why do you think there are so many single family detached houses here? And Minister of Housing kind of scratches his head like, I don't know. And his friend's like, there needs to be density in Vancouver. And as he's telling this story to this room full of people, the only thing I could think is, this is a guy who's been thinking about these problems for now probably 18 months, 2 years. People in the development industry and people like, this has been an issue for 20, 30 years. Like, we have been underbuilding for decades in Vancouver. And the guy who's basically got like full reign started thinking about these problems like 18 months ago. And it's a tricky, and I know it's a tricky thing with being a politician.
They're gonna go through so much. They're gonna go through so much because it's strange to me though how we can have an NDP government here that thinks this way, and then Ontario's housing plan is basically the same thing with a conservative. So it's come to consensus about what we need to do. I just think, like you pointed out, it's been mismanaged for so long, and the NIMBYism that goes on. My comment to Ravi was like, listen, I live in Surrey. We are the second biggest city, and we're going to be the biggest city within 10 years for sure. Bigger population, bigger landmass, bigger everything. And we have the least amount of transit of, like, Port Moody, 35,000 people has better transit than all of Surrey, any part of Surrey.
Right.
And until you get all of these pieces right, like, it's never going to work. If you go to New York, you can get wherever you want to be, however you want to get there, above ground, below ground, whatever. You can walk, it's easy. I just think we're going to struggle with that for a long, long time. And we're going to end up sticking fourplexes on single family lots, and everybody's going to hate each other. Parking's going to be a disaster. Plumbing and electrical is going to be a disaster.
What's the alternative, though? What's the alternative to fix this problem that we've neglected for 30 years? Is this not at least here's moving in the right direction? Like,
yes. However, the irresponsible amount of immigration is the problem right now, I think. Right? That's not going to... No. Here's the thing. It's an irresponsible amount.
Okay.
Right? Immigration is a good thing. It's a fantastic thing. My dad immigrated, right?
Yeah, my grandparents did too.
Yeah, you were telling me today. Your dad,
from England.
So... But
mine as well, just so I'm not left.
So we're all, that's how we're sitting here.
But think about it. You have last year 1 million people enter a country of what was 39 million people at that time, right? Like, that is, you can't grow at 2%. So we're screwing everything up even further right now, because there's no way, if we're building 200,000 homes a year, bringing in 1 million people, let's hope it's not 1 million. Let's hope it goes back down to the respectable number of double pre-pandemic, which is 465. So let's say it's 465. We're still building 250 houses if we're lucky. But we're already, 10 years behind?
Well, probably further than that.
Right? So what is the solution? The solution is let developers build more. Like when we talked with Brad Lamb, right? Yeah. Like, they shouldn't be going, okay, you're getting 6 stories here. They should be like, will you please do 8? Will you please do 12? But that's what they should be doing. But without some sort of infrastructure, like, we are where Vancouver lives right now, is the way I view it in Surrey. It's where a lot of the working class lives. And we don't have the ability to, like, what are we going to do? Just try and get in our cars when there's another 400,000 people in this city? It's not going to work.
You know, it's funny. Like, this must have been 4 or 5 years ago, when Keith was doing his podcast, Keith Roy, who I'm sure you know. So Keith. He had his show for a while there, and he interviewed me when I was in Vancouver for a conference, and he's like, what's the one thing, as someone from Toronto, that you have that we don't have? And I was trying to think, I'm like, is this like a trick question? Like, I don't know, man. And I couldn't think. I was like, honestly, Keith, I have no clue. Like, what is the one thing? He's like, great transportation in your city, which is so funny because as someone from Toronto, we think TTC sucks.
Yeah.
It's always late, but there's always bus issues. But as someone from Vancouver, they're like, what you got's great. So it's just so funny to hear the different opinions, as like, we think what we have is bad, you think what you have is bad, which is obviously worse than us. But even if you get it, are you going to be happy with it?
I don't know, man. I've been under that. What is that Gardner thing? Oh,
it looks like it's going to fall down.
Oh, that thing's terrible. In Seattle, they tore theirs down. It was the same age.
Okay, so I want to stay on the investment side of things for a second. A lot of people listening to this are very just interested in real estate and investing.
Yeah.
So I know the thesis has changed since you first started getting into it. And you can look and go like, okay, yeah, cash flow would be nice. Appreciation would be nice. What you can do in renovations to bring the value up. But people are not just trying to get a good investment. They're like, how do I get that 10 out of 10 slam dunk, exceptional investment property?
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I'll just back up a little bit because it just comes to mind because last week I was on Instagram and I saw a story of a guy who actually puts out really good content. So it has nothing to do with him, but he found a 9 cap in Winnipeg. And I know Winnipeg because I grew up in Winnipeg. And this is an area where I promise you, you're going to get, something's going to get stolen.
Wait, just for a second before you go on. Is this not just because you grew up there, you think this is a crappy area?
Maybe that's his secret power. Okay. Maybe the area's changed,
I know exactly who you're talking about, by the way.
Yeah. Well, but it was essentially you have to collect rent with a baseball bat. That's really what it would be like.
Okay.
And so when I think about it, and literally that's, I know the neighborhood because I didn't grow up very far from it. But the point is that when you might be able to get these numbers out there, but there's always typically a catch from what I see. And then, you replace a roof and all of a sudden the cash flow is gone. Right. And now you own a place in an area that's maybe not a premium area, maybe not a premium product, and you don't really have a tenant pool.
This episode of the Tom Storey Show is brought to you by the Storey team at LePage Signature in Toronto, Ontario. Although he's here on the recording with me right now and I don't like saying nice things about him to his face, Tom and his team, well, they are probably your best pick if you are looking to buy or sell residential real estate in downtown Toronto. Let's face it, probably the city of Toronto itself. Tom, make a strange face if that's wrong.
That is correct.
That is correct. All right, we are good to go. So if you are looking for one of, if not the top agent in downtown Toronto for your residential real estate needs, condos, semis, detached, if you're looking to upsize or downsize, give Tom and his team a call. And Tom, how would they get in touch with you?
I think the best thing would be go to the first link in the description of this episode, and you can book a call with me at a time that works for you. And we'll go over all the information you need and see if we can be of service.
And I recommend if you are listening to this from across the country and you're either moving to Toronto or if you're an agent outside of Toronto and you have a client moving to Toronto, go ahead and book a call with Tom because he would love to take your referral as well. That is the Storey team at LePage Signature in Toronto, Ontario. He's a pretty good guy. He knows what he's doing. Just don't tell him I said so. Tom, the last part we need to do before the end.
This communication is not intended to breach...
Cause?
Any breach.
What's that?
That was...
Oh, you want me to say it?
I don't know what the word is. I don't even know what the words are.
This communication is not intended to cause or induce breach of any existing agency agreement.
And now, back to the show.
So when I'm looking at owning blue chip real estate like Vancouver, Toronto, because you're paying in many cases for the vacancy, right? You're paying for almost a 0% vacancy.
That could be true. Yeah,
that's interesting.
That's a good way to think about it.
You're constantly bringing people through. First of all, you have your pick of the litter if you want to rent a place out.
I'm gonna write that down.
Generally,
use that line in the future.
Generally speaking, there's, like I said, rents are trending upwards. You're dealing with young professionals in many cases. And I haven't had any issues, knock on wood. I've had very few issues with tenants over the years. And that's one nice thing about owning Vancouver real estate. But mostly what people are doing is they're looking for that cap gain, right?
Yep.
And so how do you go from doing, you could throw a dartboard in the Lower Mainland, and if you hold it for at a wall and buy something wherever it lands, and if you hold it for 5 to 10 years, you're probably going to do well on it. But if you want to be really strategic, there's a couple things we're looking at. We're looking at gaps in the market. So what I mean by gaps in the market is there's general trends that exist between pricing. So think, for example, the West Side selling at a premium over the East Side in Vancouver, right? Just because we work in the city of Vancouver.
Sure. When
those prices get too close, there's an opportunity on the West Side.
Yeah.
When those prices are too far, there's an opportunity on the East Side, right? So when I bought my first house on the east side. I remember this old school agent who was like 30 years in the business said to me, he's like, if you're going to buy anything, I was going to buy a townhouse on the west side. He said, go buy a house on the east side. He said, go buy a house honestly tomorrow. He's like, I promise you, there's no reason that the difference of between the same bungalow on the east side and the west side should be $1.2 million.
Right.
Like what
the gap was too big.
And they're both like the same distance to the city. Right. So I went and I bought a house on the east side. Everything I had as a down payment, totally stretched. That house did, I mean, it was an exceptional market, an exceptional run up, but we bought it for 800. We put 60 grand into it. We sold the house for 1.4 a year and a half later. So it's that.
What year was this?
This was we bought it in 2014. We sold it in 2016.
Wow. So not even like the recent crazy jumps either. That was before.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Vancouver didn't, like Vancouver after a foreign buyer came in, there was a big downturn. It wasn't like us. We kept going up.
Yeah. Well, and
It was 2016?
we can talk about, like, here's another example of a gap though. So right now, Surrey pre-sale, 1,100 a foot ish for a lot of.
I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Oh yeah. Well,
we're not going pre-sales
but
here.
I can tell you, 1,100 a foot is like pretty par for the course for new construction in Surrey. Downtown right now, I can buy a building within 15 years of it being like 15-year-old building, good building, solid building, great strata, 1,100 a foot.
Yeah.
So it's like, to me now, no offense to Surrey, but downtown center ice, that gap is narrow. The opportunity right now in the market is downtown. Downtown is below replacement cost. It absolutely is.
Well, we noticed that here, and you can offend Surrey all you want. Don't worry. We noticed here, like I think I have that on a shirt somewhere. We noticed that during the pandy that we had our detached houses went up like 1.8, right? 1.7, 1.8, 1.8 for a lot of detached houses. Like this place you're in today would have been 2, right? At one point during the pandemic, we had a house in East Van, and I was like, I mean, sure, it's a Vancouver special, right? Had a basement suite. It was a 5-bedroom house, right? Older, but it was 1.8. And I was like, something's got to shift here. Something's wrong when 45 minutes outside of the city is the same price for a city, different product, kind of, but both detached homes with rental basements.
Totally.
So I'm like, something's wrong. And obviously the bottom fell out of the valley and it barely moved. Has it moved in Vancouver? I mean,
it's back to where it was, kind of almost peak pricing.
Yeah.
So like we're basically pricing things similar to what we would have been
close.
Pricing like 2022, March of 2022.
How much higher was March of 2022 compared to August of 26 or July, I guess, of 2016?
Oh God.
A lot.
Was it a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because here it's double.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I'd have to look at my
because it did peak out for a while, right?
Yeah, it did with detached. There was a softening in the detached market for a while, and then condos kind of took off. But I feel like what's interesting is like those gaps, by the way, I think used to be easier to recognize because you'd see these flows and you'd see like houses take off, and the gap between houses and condos or houses and townhomes would be huge.
I track that all the time.
And then you'd see it come up, and it would be like, and it's such a good way to kind of understand the market. But I think the weird thing about what the pandemic did is it almost made everything in the region the same price in a weird way.
It did.
And it made rents all the same. Yeah. So it was like now, but I think at some point something swings back where the areas that I think you should pay a premium for
we'll get back there,
right? So that's kind of recognizing the gap. But I mean, just to think of other ways to, I think, do well in expensive markets like Toronto and Vancouver, is we are going through a revolution in terms of being upzoned. And I think there's huge opportunities to buy based on zoning right now. And I mean, it's a trickier thing to do, but we're being very strategic about where we're putting people based on the infrastructure and what's coming to that area and what's happening with zoning. Like even think about like they're talking about the 6-pack now, like 6 homes on a single family detached lot. Think of that, what that does to the value of that land, right? Yep. Like right now you can build a duplex. Yeah. Now you're going to be able to build 6 homes, right? So we've been very strategic that way. There's a few buildings right now in like the Alberni downtown Cole Harbor, and I won't say too much, but that are totally underbuilt, right? That are perfect wind-ups right now, but they're perfect rentals right now as well.
Wind-ups are so hard.
Wind-ups are so hard
So
to do, but
hard.
when you look at like a street, like when you look at the parcels of land for these buildings now that are long in the tooth, still good buildings, and next door we're seeing like these like mega towers being built.
Right.
We're seeing a ton of that here.
I mean, you can make a safe bet. And I mean, most of our clients are buy and hold people anyways, right?
Right.
Like the only regrets they have is selling property. So that's the thing, right? So a lot of these people are looking long-term. We've also been, and just to keep going with the development, like we're looking constantly at the major infrastructures, projects going on. I mean, I'm sure that's what you're monitoring in Surrey and you in Toronto, but it's that idea, like right now, like where is employment, where is big development? There's St. Paul's Hospital going up in Northeast Falls Creek area in Vancouver. That's going to be huge for that neighborhood. So we monitor that. We've got other projects like the Broadway SkyTrain line or subway line right now.
We welcome these projects that you speak of.
Yeah.
We don't have those. All we have is canceled projects. That's a tough spot for us right now. Like, for instance, you bring up the hospital. Here, we have an NDP government that secured a bunch of land for the hospital that's here. And it's like, cool, hospital's great location. It's all awesome. What's Kevin Falcon running on? Canceling that project.
Right.
He sold the last spot of land they had for a second hospital. So it's like, I'm not necessarily on board with all of the policies that are being brought in, like the rental policy. In my estimation, opening up rentals was a massive blow for first-time buyers, right? So you've got one party that screws it up harsh here, and then maybe not in the housing side, but the Liberal Party is looking to screw up my town and push out another hospital for another 10 years.
For me, from Toronto, opening up rentals was just that any building other than senior buildings, you have to allow, if you buy a unit, you can rent it out. And that was not a thing
if you owned
before.
a property of a certain year,
Okay.
the strata could get together and rule out rentals. So it would be owner occupied or a portion owner occupied or whatever. And what that did is that kept purchasing low because you didn't have to compete against
Right, you
investors.
were competing with investors, yeah.
So it actually got people into properties. But then the government, and the very socialist government we have right now, opened it up and said, hey, we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. So investors are, you figure the party for the people, the NDP, should be almost the other way around. But now they've gone past that, and it's like the renter takes priority over top of the homeowner.
I'd love to know your opinion on the upzoning, because me and Steve were talking about this. And we've had a few comments on our channel. So, when you talk about, okay, there's a duplex on there right now, but a 6-pack could be built, and that will make the land more valuable. It will make what it's going to cost to buy each of those, if you were split it up to a 6 small condo or something, where the goal here from the government side of things is we want to upzone so that there is more housing.
Yeah.
And there will be more housing, but maybe it will cost more for what you're getting for that piece of housing. Is there any truth behind that?
It's so tricky, and it depends, because obviously when Kennedy Stewart, our former mayor, was talking about it, he had so many restrictions on what the housing, some of it had to be rented under market, some of it.
Which will
so
never happen.
it just depends what you can actually do with it. But the challenge right now is that all the costs, when you think of what, even the permitting process, like just how expensive it is right now for builders, all that gets passed on to the consumer.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And I mean, so I think it comes down to what happens with build costs and what happens to land costs. But I think best use is going up like generally across the board right now in Vancouver, at least, which I can speak to. And I think that just creates opportunities for people that want to own real estate, right? So that's kind of my logic. I'm hoping that you never know with policies what's going to happen with provincial and municipal.
You don't know what's going to screw up.
And there's always something, right? So but I mean, it's something on the radar. Like, I think right now it's an interesting time, and it goes back to that, like Manhattan in the 1800s. Like, there's going to be a lot of opportunity created by demand and how we get to fulfilling supply needs.
So as an investor, if I'm listening to this, and I know when we interviewed the housing minister, he said that this is going to roll out September, October.
I think it's October.
The Homes for People plan is rolling out in October, where snap of a finger, most of BC, at least 3 units, if not 4 units on single family lots that were previously single family.
Yeah.
If I'm an investor hearing that, knowing this is rolling out in October, am I not really looking at opportunities right now to try to buy these properties now because they're going to go up in value in the future?
I would say so. I mean, I don't think there's an economist that comes on our show that says, he's like, my only advice is buy as much dirt as you can as far west as you can in the city of Vancouver or in the region, right?
Here, I'll let you.
Which
We
is
quoted this before.
buy land, they're not making it anymore, Mark Twain, right?
That's the stuff.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing, right? So I mean, as far west as you can go is generally what his idea is. So I mean, I think if you go out and you buy a single family detached or a single family lot, a 33 by 122, you're going to be the value of that land is going to go up.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine it doesn't.
What do you think they're going to build? Now, this might be a different question for Vancouver because I think Surrey, we usually have more 60-foot lots.
Yeah.
Right. If given those two scenarios, a 30-foot lot and a 60-foot lot, and they go, okay, 3 units on the 30-foot, 4 units on the 60-foot, what is the new construction on those lots? What do you think they're going to build?
I think so. Yeah, it's interesting. So I think what they were actually right now, I've seen like rough guidelines for oversized lots getting 60, and it's tough to say what they're going to actually allow for. The Kennedy Stewart proposal was, I believe, the 6-pack was on a 33 by 122, which is pretty incredible. I think that was the idea behind it. But generally speaking, I think it really depends because I think right now we're still going to see people do like single family with like a laneway house and maybe a legal suite.
That's where it starts, right?
People are going to still want to do that. But what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a lot of, I don't know what people will build in the future. I'm sure there's going to be creative, like whenever you can do something like that, the architectural community rises to the occasion, right? There'll be some amazing design that comes out of this.
I think
some terrible ones.
And some terrible as well. But I still think like right now, what a lot of people are doing is the duplex and then the strata coach home, right? And they're selling all 3 units.
I look at my lot here, so I'm a 50-foot lot. I just think, obviously, they're not going to tear down because the house is too new, but I think they're going to take a lot like mine eventually. Whatever comes down, and then you have 3 tandem-style townhouses. Right, side by side. They're going to be 15 feet wide or whatever your old townhouse kind of was, right? That, right?
15 to 17.
They're going to be about that. A little bit of variance on either side. The whole front yard's going to be parking, right? It's going to be 1 in, 1 out. And what I'm worried about in Surrey is now each one of those townhouses, basement suite in the back.
Yeah. So you know who's doing this well is Kelowna is actually ahead of I think Vancouver with some of their zoning for single family lots, like specifically in the downtown area. And they've got some amazing, like on I think 50 footers where there's like 5 units and it's basically like full attached, like front back, almost like a fourplex where you've got 2 duplexes on like crammed together.
Yeah.
So somebody lives off the back, somebody lives off the front of the yard on both sides. Yeah. And then there's some kind of laneway or carriage home off the back, right? And it works. I mean, it works.
We've got some of those out here, where you have like just basically a fourplex, a square fourplex, and then detached on the back is 4 separate garages, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Are they going to turn these into separate units though? Or is it going to be a strata on these 4 to 6 unit?
Apparently.
Yeah. It would be so non-conforming.
With maintenance fees or you guys, strata fees, you guys call them? Like,
actually, it might even be conforming strata. It would be conforming strata.
I just showed yesterday, I showed Dave listing,
Mason?
right? And that's one of those no strata fee townhouses.
Freehold townhouse.
Yeah. And they're not common here.
When I hear fourplex, I always think dumpy, but fourplex is what it will be. Yeah. But it will it'll live like a duplex, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly, they totally are. Because we've got just down the street here, we've got a bunch of like duplexes and then there's basement suites, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. But over in an area in Provincetown, just down the road here, you have those fourplexes. So you go in from the front and then the other guys basically, I guess they can walk down the side and come in. And then, but 4 single parking across the back. Right. maybe it makes
Parking
sense.
seems to be where you get all hot and bothered about this.
Well,
It's like,
it's
where's
my
everyone going to
parking
park?
spaces? Well, here it's a big change here. I know you probably don't remember the last time you were here, any big difference, but now there never used to be parking issues here. And now there's constantly parking issues here because everybody since the pandemic, me included.
Does your neighbor still have a blue tarp over his car?
Don't get me started. Don't get me started on bylaws. That's
I'm gonna
another
start
whole
an
thing.
HOA in his community
Oh, yeah.
to get his neighbor's blue tarp off of his car.
It's an RV and it's a blue tarp.
I think in Vancouver at least, I can't speak for the region, but I think in Vancouver at least they don't prioritize cars at all. So
Right.
like that won't come into consideration, I don't think, parking. And at least it doesn't seem like it will.
In an area where, you can, I mean, the difference between Vancouver and here for thinking things like an Uber or a taxi or heaven forbid train or a bus is a totally different thing.
It's because you don't have the other alternatives like Vancouver does, right? That's why you're worried so much about the car, because you need a car to go do everything here, where if you live in the
Correct.
city, you could walk to more things
Correct.
or drop
Yeah.
on a bus. Or
Yeah. So the average house here will have 5 or 6 cars for every single house here, right? So you're going to have...
Is that wow?
Yeah, so you're going to
That's a
have
high
2
number.
cars for the basement. Sweet.
you're
gonna have-
talking about if they were all built as fourplexes or right now?
right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So you get 2 cars for the basement because there's
People
a
in
couple...
Surrey just like cars too much.
right?
Is the
No,
issue.
but there's a couple renting a basement suite for $1,800.
They each have a car.
They each have a car for sure because they're not going. How are they getting to work?
Yeah.
Then
fair.
you have,
Yes.
the 2 owners upstairs, married couple, let's say, they each have a car. And now in this neighborhood, the kids are all aging out. So there could be 6 cars already per.
And the other one just end up on the street right now is what's happening.
There. It's all over. It's all over. Not in my backyard.
man over here.
But then on the other side of it, I do think it's like, this can't be the number one priority. I understand that, right? But you can't just ignore a city forever and not give them infrastructure, right? And that's what I feel has happened. We've neglected here a lot. And I mean, from my point of view, I don't use transit to UBC. I thought that transit to UBC was pretty good, and they're digging a subway, SkyTrains underground,
That'll
all the way out there.
Eventually, we'll go out there. Yeah.
Right. Is it not even getting that far?
It's
I
not
don't even
getting
know.
that far,
Yeah,
no.
awesome. Cool.
Not right now. But I think
Half a project. Good.
well, you know what the one thing is like what bothers me to no end is the projects that are stalled because it's not profitable for the developer to take it on because the community amenity contributions are too high. And this is what drives me nuts. I think there needs to be a lot of rethinking the model at City Hall in terms of how much you can bleed a developer for a project to go through, because the reality is it's a business building homes. And if they're not going to take on the risk or the project if they can't meet their bottom lines. And the reality is if we're not getting good housing or new housing, right, then it's not to the benefit of anyone. I mean, I think there should be community amenity contributions. I just think that right now it's all out of whack, you know?
So we've talked a lot about what the future of housing could look like with the new regulations. Let's take it back now for just 2023. You know, we're heading into the second half of the year here. The first half, I think, was surprising to a lot of people, including people in the industry that keep a close eye on things, because I didn't think in Toronto we'd see 5 months in a row of price appreciation
Right.
after the rates last year. Similar happened out here. Yes.
I thought we were going to see continuous
I thought we were gonna be
downturn,
just
10%.
just slow and nice and hovering.
Yeah.
We went like this. We're up significantly. Now, that was the first half of the year. I don't think the second half is going to be the same. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because we've kind of pegged bottom in Vancouver as like November 2022,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yep.
I remember
I
because
got
I had
roasted on my channel for doing that video.
Because it was
Like,
too close to when it happened.
There's a really good argument that last week was the bottom and it was November. And then in our numbers, January is the bottom. But I agree with you. I think that was the bottom.
Well, it's funny, yeah. And I remember the reason I know it so well is I had a townhouse that we had renovated for resale, and it was a beautiful place, and it was like crickets, and we
Right
were priced
after.
well and everything else, and we did okay on it, but like we had to negotiate, and it was like it felt pretty scary in terms of like it was like nothing was happening, right? But then I feel like January started to pick up. It was like almost right out of the gates in Vancouver, like where it was like the new year started and there was renewed energy. And then like March roughly March, April, we were kind of going
Back to it,
right
super
back to it.
You know what I just got right now? I can actually see on my computer there's a little red dot on my text message, and I checked it while you guys weren't just being a little stealth. I just got requests for showing feedback.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, can you believe it? What's
Because
going
does
on?
it sell in a week that they
Well,
actually want to get feedback?
Oh, my guy didn't want to write on it. To me, it was a really well-priced property. And the agent, who I know well, is like,
Is
what's going on?
Is this an
Yeah.
automatic email for showing
this
feedback?
was
This is a
him
personal
texting me.
text saying, "Hey,
Yeah,
how did
he
it go?"
texted me. Yeah.
well, yeah, and I think since the rate increase, everything's kind of softened a bit. But I sometimes I wonder about, like, it's like the analogy of when you're driving 160 kilometers an hour and you reduce speed to 120,
Yeah.
it feels like
Yeah.
you're going slow, but the market's still moving, right? And I feel like a lot of stuff, and maybe it's just my luck, but a lot of stuff I've got buyers for right now is like the product that everybody that's moving. Yeah, it's like it's end user product, right?
Do you know what we just got? We just got a registration form for multiple offers.
Oh yeah,
It
that
goes
just came in.
Well, I don't want to say when it goes in because that'll give away when this. But it was just announced this week.
Interesting.
So you have that 801 form or whatever.
we have 801. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And now we are. Sorry. Total side note on that. So that guy's either got no action on that listing, or he's a good agent doing his job. I'm going to say it's probably number 2, but maybe we'll see.
Or both.
Or both. But yeah, so we have now a registration, and we have to supply it within 24 hours after offer presentation to all of the offers.
Oh, so our 801, it's a bit gray for us. Like we have to keep them all, but we don't have to give them unless we're told to give them.
We have to supply them.
But I got no issue with.
I'm gonna make. No, I think it's great.
Yeah, it's fine.
And here's the
If
best.
that
part.
helps the buyer feel better, like this offer was registered. The ghost offer, whatever word was being used in Vancouver. What was it that you guys were talking about? Or just the fake offers or whatever?
People call it ghost off. Yeah.
Yeah. This is great. It means
I
like
think it's- I
every
think it's
buyer
great.
knows exactly how many
Yeah.
offers there are, and we're on our way to open bidding, which will fix everything.
Have
gentlemen.
you seen? Yeah, right. Yeah. Have you seen though that this is the form? So it has to be signed by the seller.
by the seller?
It has to be signed by the seller. So the seller signs off on saying that they were presented all of these offers. These are the offers I presented. It has to be signed by the listing agent. It has to be provided to every buyer that wrote an offer the next day.
It doesn't say the
It-
buyer's name. It just says the brokerage
it says
of the offer.
brokerage, the brokerage that the offer came from.
Okay.
And I think there might be a checkbox like, yes, it was presented, or
Oh, yeah, we have that.
refused, or whatever,
Yeah, we have
like
that.
whatever it is. But we have to supply them. And the best part about this whole thing, where do you think this came from? Who do you think implemented this?
All your regulators sound the same to me. They all start with BC and then have a bunch of other letters behind
Okay,
them.
so this is actually the Vancouver Real Estate Board, Greater Vancouver.
Yeah.
The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver.
There it is.
Fraser Valley Real Estate Board and Chilliwack Board got together. So this is the real estate agents implementing this, and not
it's not the
It's
regulators.
not the regulator. This is us taking a step towards implementation.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great.
Not only do I think there's nothing wrong with it, I think it's the way it should have been originally, because now we can go, okay, this is how many we had, and we can take the person to task. And if the agent has to now have the seller signing off.
Right.
Right. So they're going to go, if there was, let's say 2 offers or whatever, there's going to be some sort of track record now. And I get a copy of that as the buyer's agent.
I think anything.
Am I going to get a copy of it though? We'll see.
Well,
Yes.
honestly though, I mean, if it does away with a few bad actors or whatever,
Agreed.
it's great. Right. And I mean, it's all this paperwork is painful, it's so painful, but at the end of the day, you get used to it and you figure it out. Right. And you adapt in this market. And I don't know, I've all these disclosures that have come out in the last, like, call it 2 years.
But what's your experience with disclosures? Because mine is the client goes, yeah, whatever. Just
totally.
Give me the offer. I don't care about all this.
Yeah, but I
other
mean,
stuff.
we had to get a new car, and it was the same thing. They gave me
Right.
like 45 pages of whatever. I was just initialing randomly. Like, they didn't even go over anything with me.
DocuSign, I think, or Athenasign or whatever.
The best thing that ever happened to real estate, but also scary how quick you get things back sometimes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you used to sit there and be like, okay, initial here, this is what this means, this is what this means. And now so many people are just like, sign.
But I remember driving to get initials, and like you'd be at like a party and have a glass of wine. Then it was like, I got to get this signed, and I got to get it signed in the next 45 minutes. And it's like you're like it's such a huge improvement.
It's
to
the
have this.
best thing that's happened to
It
our
is.
industry. Honestly, I remember early on in my career, I drove an hour and a half to get initials for a counter offer, which didn't end up working out.
Yeah.
And it was like a Saturday, and I was like, well, this is happening. Like, I have no other choice.
Totally.
Yeah, I presented one time just a couple blocks from here at a townhouse for a best friend of mine, and I think we finished negotiation around 1 a.m. and then I had to drive to Tawasin to get him to sign off on the initials.
There should be a new regulation that if offer dates come back because the market picks up again, because it will at some point, or if they're already here right now, they start at noon or 3 p.m. so that everyone, including the buyer and the seller, can get home for dinner, and this doesn't start at 6 p.m. and go till midnight.
You know what they used to do here before my time is you could not present offers on Sunday. And then
because
what
football
happened,
was on?
I think it had something to do with church, but
Yeah,
maybe football.
Probably.
But then what happened is midnight on Sunday, when the market was hot, all the agents would be standing outside the house and they'd actually present in person midnight on Sunday or Monday morning, I guess.
At like 1 a.m. on Monday morning.
With their horse and buggy out.
Yeah, totally.
That's dedication. So the second half of 2023 in your market in Vancouver, are we optimistic, but it's not going to be the same as the first half, I don't think.
I think it's going to get softer probably for the balance of the year. I think everything, like the way I've been thinking about it is earlier in the year, we were kind of cautiously optimistic that we might even see a rate cut this year, like in like Q4. And
I don't know what idiot would say that.
Yeah. And honestly, and then it feels like everything's got shifted, right? Like it just feels like everything's got delayed. So assuming we don't have some kind of major recession, I think I'm kind of in line with Phil Soper, who was just on your program, where I think 2025 is going to be like a huge year. And I think 2024, I think it will be a decent year, but I think we'll see a rate cut in 2024, and then I think things are going to
Q what 2024.
I would probably, if I had to, roast me in the YouTube comments, but I'm thinking probably like Q3.
Q2 2024. Hank, come back and comment down below in a year
and it's
from
going to
now.
be a few 25 slowly.
I think it's going to be slow. It's going to be slow, but I think what happens is right now with people on the sidelines, once it starts happening, like I think a lot of the burst of activity was just by more optimism in the market holding rate, right? I mean, like look what happened.
It was.
And then it's like the quarter point increase, everybody kind of moves to the sidelines, and the second that we see any kind of movement on that rate, I think it's just going to go bananas.
I think for people that have a minimum 5-year perspective on owning real estate, but ideally a 10-year, which anyone that watches my content knows that's how I talk about everything. Like I don't care about these short-term things. I'm thinking long-term. You should look at this summer and rate hikes or anything that happens as a positive to you as a buyer.
Totally.
Because you are not taking a variable rate unless for some reason you are. You're taking a fixed rate. Still wouldn't lock in for 5 years. I think that's crazy. Maybe 3 at this moment in time.
Pay the premium.
Yeah.
This is a fight
Get
we've
in.
been having.
Get in. There's going to be less competition this summer. Historically, August is a slow time. Yes, there's less to choose from, but if you can find what you want, go get it. Go get the property, like you said, that you maybe not to that level that you have to do all those renos, but go in and find something that's not marketed very well.
Sure.
Go pick it up, buy it now, have that 5-year perspective. I guarantee by 2025, that's strong language. I know I get roasted for
You're
that.
bad at math.
I don't guarantee.
2028.
No. Well, okay. No, but I'm just saying, even 2 years later, I think you're going to look back and go like, happy I bought in the summer of 2023
Probably,
when everyone was on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Because you always look at how these things play out. And when everyone's saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, the people that did it usually do fairly well.
I think there's two things. Bang on about right now, like with the rate. Like we've been saying, date the rate, marry the property.
Yeah.
And then we've also been saying like it's a yo-yo on an escalator, right? So like that's the idea, and that's a Dustin Woodhouse, who was a mortgage broker in the city. Now he's not, but he that idea of the market being a yo-yo on an escalator. Right now, I feel like if the yo-yo comes down, but if you're holding it for 3 to 5 years, you're going to be in a good position.
Yeah.
And I think anybody that's buying real estate for 1 to 2 years, like the verdict's always out.
Yeah.
Who knows, right? I mean, a year or two, especially in this world where something changes like on a weekly basis. Like if you're planning on selling in a year or two, don't buy.
Agreed. I think it's silly.
Yeah.
I think it makes no sense. I think even if you're moving to a city, you know your job's going to change in 2 years, unless you're going to hold the property and rent it out when you leave. Don't buy, rent.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
100%.
Lifestyle factor. I know home ownership's great, but lifestyle factors in too. And it's expensive to move.
Can you imagine?
Land transfer tax. Those
Did you rent?
crazy
Did you ever
real
rent?
estate fees.
Did you ever rent?
I rented in university.
Did you rent?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just by
Because
virtue
I
of
never
finances.
did. Well, I mean, I guess I rented a room off my brother. I don't know if that counted, but like it never even crossed my mind. It never crossed my mind.
You know, the thing you're saying about pride of ownership, I can't remember who did the report, but it was a few years back. But like still the number one reason that people buy real estate in Canada is stability, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's to know that you have a home, right? It's to know that you're not going to be given notice. And I think that's the thing that's scary in Vancouver. And I mean, like people always, you know, I think being an agent in Vancouver, the critique is always like, oh yeah, you want the market to go crazy. You want prices to go up. You want your city to be unaffordable. I can like count on my hand the people that like the dozens of groups of friends that we have that no longer live here. Like it's like I've got like a handful of people that I've been, you know, we're close friends with for 20 years in the city that haven't left, right? So it's like there's some real problems around housing in this city, and that's not the goal. But I think like generally speaking, watching people lose their places because of, you know, it's hard now with the Residential Tenancy Act, but you still see people constantly, the landlord moving in or serving notice for a variety of reasons. And I guess my point is only that I think we need more housing, which takes it back to the earlier conversation. Really.
Have you guys had any new purpose-built rentals coming here? Because we've had actually quite a few in Toronto, and it's a nice alternative that we're telling our clients that want to rent.
Yeah.
Hey, it's actually more expensive, and our rental regulations is if it's built after November 2018, there is no rent control in Ontario, but everything built before that there is.
Yeah.
And these corporations are not missing the yearly rent increases. So it might be more expensive, but no one's moving into that unit. No one can kick you out. It's owned by a corporation. An owner doesn't own it.
I want to just grab, because it's on my phone.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to grab this because I want to talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
go grab it.
purpose-built
Go
rental.
grab it. Yeah, yeah.
Grab it. Yeah. No, we're not seeing a ton. I've seen more.
We've had a lot.
But then we don't really have the same thing that everybody else does where you guys can deal with rentals and stuff. So we don't really see the rental side. I honestly don't.
You know, it's interesting. We've had people that were looking for, you know, typical try to find a condo rental in Toronto, which is a condo and it's a landlord and you make an offer. And it was so competitive that we're like, hey, here's the list of purpose-built rental companies. Go them. Some of them actually had like great opportunities where they'd like pay a month rent for you just to move in right now. And
I'm going to take a controversial side of things. I think we got to stop telling people it's okay to rent. Is that bad?
well, there's life situations that doesn't hold up.
But I don't think we should be looking to be lifelong
People
renters.
don't have I would agree with that. I think most Canadians would agree with that, but some people can't do anything else.
Yeah.
They have no other option.
Can't we empower them though? Can't we like, hey, this is how you do it?
Well, I think we're trying, but you can say as much as you want if you don't have a job that gives you a certain salary, and especially if you're in a rent controlled situation that's so good, why would you move?
Actually, that's something we're getting where people they have crazy low rents and they are buying and they're renting out.
They're
the
first
other
time
place.
buyer investors, right?
Yeah. It's happening. It's
Yeah.
happening quite a bit.
Yeah. You got the info on the
You know
purpose
what?
built?
I was so that's one of the biggest challenges right now. I'm
Trying to
just
find
looking
something in
for
your phone.
I was just looking for stats. Yeah, but yeah, exactly. It actually is a big challenge. No, but the purpose built rental thing in Vancouver, and it's like staggering the numbers. And I don't know if I actually have it, so it doesn't really matter. But the whole point is that we have just underbuilt in that area for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And we've welcomed so many new people to BC that it's like staggering. And now it's like there's no incentives really for developers to build purpose-built rental, which is a real problem, right? But I also think like we are moving to a model very much like New York or other big cities where people will be lifelong renters, right? And so
I think that's just the natural progression.
Yeah, but if we can't provide stable housing, that's the problem. Like we need purpose-built rental like dramatic.
But REITs are terrible. But all those big corporations.
Well, this
horrible.
is what I was gonna like. That's the other thing too, right now, right? Because we always need somebody to demonize in real estate, and or for the politicians to demonize. And now it's like my fear is that REITs, like, because the NDP is already talking about REITs being kind of like bad actors, and it's crazy because it's like, how else is it going to be built, right? I mean, and this is who else? Like, the margins are so unattractive for anybody that it has to be somebody thinking 20 years out.
And I'm going to assume
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
If you're a renter, you're going to be treated better by a corporation that you're renting from.
I've had
pop.
firsthand data that it's way better to rent in these new purpose-built rentals than a landlord who owns that one property and doesn't really know the rules and regulations. And but the corporations are not going to miss when they can increase your rent. It's coming in the mail that day.
Either am I. I know you're one of those nice landlords that like doesn't increase rent. I'm like,
that property I
time,
sold, so it
day.
doesn't matter. But I try to be nice once
past an hour, man.
Every once in a while. This was fun, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. This is nice and great studio. Good to be here.
I don't know about that, but it's a studio.
Oh, by the way, if you've listened this long, for the record, I always make fun of Steve because I'm not here that often, but I can see this in his background. I always call it unused gym equipment.
Right.
It is actually real. It's not just props. And you must have cleaned it because it still looks pretty
actually
new,
did spend like yesterday cleaning this place for everybody to come through. Pride of ownership.
There you
Full
go.
circle.
There you go. I mean, if you were renting this basement, you never would have cleaned it like
That's
this.
on the other part of the basement. Best tenants ever, though.
Adam,
tenants are
thank you so
fantastic.
much. This was awesome. For people listening or watching on YouTube, what's the best place for them to go to find out more about your podcast and just you guys in general running your team?
Yeah, you can find us at www.vancouverrealestatepodcast.com. You can find us on all the major podcast players, and then we're at scalenarealestate.com as well.
And hopefully on YouTube too.
One of these days, we're going to
get you on that.
I might have to pick your brain here on that. So.
Any for people listening to this, any recent episodes that you've done that you think are like your favorite recent that they should go listen to? If they want to figure out who you guys are, what you do on your show, is there like, go listen to this episode with this guest?
Yeah, that's well, you know what? I know I would say the Phil Soper episode, but I know you guys just had him on, so it's probably going to be a lot of similar.
Sure.
But let me just quickly look through here. I would say go and start with Daryl Simpson, who was with Boza for years, and that's episode 374.
374. What are we on episode? Like 61, 62?
I want to say this is probably 60. Probably 60. I don't know.
We're slowly catching up. Well, we'll never
I
catch
appreciate
you, but
making the first 100 episodes, though. That's
yeah, man. Hey, we'll do it virtually, and maybe
and we'll have to have you guys on our show as
100%.
well. So.
Would love to.
Anytime, whenever Tom wants to come back here, because I saw you guys are doing it in studio now.
Well, you know what though, we can send you out a link. Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
All right, man. You gonna wrap this up?
Yeah. Hey, man.
Let's
Thank
hope
you
this
so much.
recording
Great to
worked.
meet you, man. Yeah. Hopefully we've been recording. All right.
This flashing red button, actually.
Thanks everybody for watching on YouTube. Thank you for listening on the audio platforms. Have an amazing day, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.